Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. This is a wonderful episode. Really excited to share with you Wally Kozak. Many of you probably don't know Wally Kozak, but he has had an enormous impact on the coaching community, particularly in Canada. He's done some writing for Hockey Canada, coaching excellence. He's run hockey schools in Calgary for years, runs a bunch of different mentorship type programs, and he's actually heading off to help out with the Leafs a little bit. We won't go into too much detail there. A lot of that's behind the NHL wall. So, but this guy just has so much information that's so powerful on everything that we've been talking about for many, many months and years now. So I'm really excited to share it with you. He's like Scotty Bowman. It's the best way to put it. Him and Scotty Bowman are in their own league. They've been around a long time, old time coaches. They've seen a bunch. They understand how to effectively get performances, the role of a coach, and are still unbelievably modern in their approach and lifelong learners and thirst to continually always get better, push this forward. Cannot stress how awesome Wally Kozak is. So let's get into it. This is a fun one. Welcome to the Hockey IQ podcast, Wally Kozak. Really excited to have you on early morning there in Calgary, right?
It is not that bad though. 8:30 isn't bad.
Not bad at all, but I'm really excited to get in a conversation with you today. I know we've talked a little bit behind the scenes here, but one of my favorite people, and definitely probably my favorite hockey coach out there, Daryl Belfry, said the world of you. So I'm excited for this conversation. Maybe just give a quick 30-second background, even though that's pretty impossible, of how you've come to where you are in the hockey world today.
Well, I played a lot of sports in school, and hockey, of course, was my favorite growing up. And it was a big reason for me getting an education, because I was came from a first generation immigrant family, with education being really important. Played at the University of Saskatchewan, went to Team Canada, played 1 year there, which was sort of transformational for me. 1 year of minor pro, and then I decided to get back to my vocation, which was teaching, where I coached football, wrestling, and track, and played senior hockey. And I did get to go to a Chicago Blackhawk camp and play in the minors for a year. But the imprint of my experience with Father Bauer and the Canadian National Program has been life-lasting in terms of the way I approach coaching and teaching. I coach football, wrestling, and track, and coaching is coaching. It doesn't matter what sport, and it just doesn't make any difference. You have to have a grounded framework of why you're coaching, and stay the course to be successful.
Just through all of that, you've talked about the framework, and I think it's excellent, with the coach evolution. And obviously, you've been through that evolution. So maybe dive into the yelling to telling to asking framework, and then we should get into the story of taking over a Bantam team there in Calgary, and the stories of overcoaching.
Okay. Well, generationally speaking, when I grew up, there was no problems at all in minor hockey, particularly because most parents were grounded. they were leaders in communities, and they ran sporting associations, and family values and respect were sort of the root of my time. So you never had issues as a coach. You were highly respected, treated by respect by the players and parents, and the association stood behind you, and you could really coach. So when I quit playing pro hockey and I returned to Calgary, I was teaching high school, coaching football, wrestling, and track, but I was running hockey schools in the northeast part of the city. And the president of the local AA, AAA association approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in coaching a Bantam AA team. And I thought, oh, I'm pretty busy, but I better see if I would really like to coach the sport I probably know the most about. So I took it on. And oddly enough, I inherited a ringer hockey team because the two community teams in the quadrant of my city, one was called Marlborough Community, the other was Marlborough Park Community, played in the city final the previous year. So here I have the pick of the litter of the two best teams in Calgary, and I got them. Running hockey schools, teaching phys ed, knowing how to plan and run a practice. I thought, wow, this is going to be great. In November, early November, late October, I was in fourth place. And I was frustrated. The kids were doing everything I wanted. I was planning, I was working hard. They were working hard. They were just doing everything to please me, and it was terrific. But I wasn't getting results. So I was so frustrated, I thought I almost was going to quit. But I think this is important for any coaches that reaches a point of frustration is I sought help. I went and talked to the coach of the city championship team of the year before, who happened to be a father of of the championship team, father of one of my players. And I said to him, Ken, what the heck did you do? Kids do everything I ask. They work hard. They're great. And we just can't get the result we should be getting. And he said, wow, in his growly voice, Wally, I don't know a damn thing about hockey. So I really never had any practices. I might have had 5 or 6, but boy, I arranged a lot of games, and we played on a flooded area, a great big slough in the area in the Marlborough Park, and we just played shinny. And I just opened and closed the gate and patted him on the back and said, way to go, boys. And I said, looked, and I went and shook my head, and it was like a light going off. I'd been overcoaching. I'd been so structured, telling them what to do. They wanted to please me. They weren't playing. They were doing what I was telling them to do without thinking. So it was a key moment for me. I went back and boy, I got into small area games, half ice scrimmages, cross ice scrimmages, neutral zone scrimmages, nothing but a lot of cheering. And even the same on the bench, just all positive, positive. And we managed to turn the season around, win the cities and win the provincials. And to this day, I often tell this story when I deliver certification clinics in Canada that we overcoach. If we just let them play more and be positive. So for all the coaches out there, like parent coaches that think, gee, I don't know much about the game, don't worry about it. That Ken Brackle was just a father who'd played the game growing up, knew enough about it to open and close doors and cheer and be positive. That was the result he got. And it changed the way I approach coaching from that moment forward. So it was a life-changing moment for me, a realization that you think you know it all about the sport, and you don't know how to apply what you know. And there's a new line that a friend of mine has come up with in one of the books he wrote. Whatever you do as a coach or a leader, it's all about doing the right stuff, the right amount, the right time, and the right way. And I learned that lesson very early, thank goodness.
Yeah, and that's structured what you think the role of a coach is. And I think that your definition most closely aligns what I think the true role of a coach is. But I'll let you say what that is. I think it's so powerful, exactly what you said, of like not overdoing it, not being too much for the players because you just overwhelm them.
Totally. And good kids will want to please you, and they'll just totally do what you want. And there's just no doubt about it. That's where the yelling comes in terms of generational coaching. Um, in my era in minor hockey, there wasn't a lot of yelling, but then maybe about 10 years after, started to be more vocal. I don't know if it occurred after the NHL expansion or what, but people got pretty excited on the bench and frustrated players weren't doing what they wanted, and they would be yelling at them and actually abusing them. And that yelling just wasn't the way to go. And we would say a good coach would be would graduate from yelling to telling, being constructive and telling them what to do better and how to do it. But now in 21st century coaching, especially when you don't know something, you just have to ask. And even at the NHL level, American League level, there's way too much coaching. There's too much telling. If they have 8-minute, 10-minute power play video session where the coach doesn't shut up, he goes through the power play over and over, the other team, what they're doing, what we're going to do. And I talked to an American League coach, said the best video session they had is where they broke into 4 units of 5, and the players themselves look at the video and came back and presented what they saw, what they thought from each of their groups. At the post season, those players said that was the best video session they ever had. And I agree. You engage the young player to think. And when you ask them a question, you got to listen, and they're thinking, their brains, the wheels are turning. And on the ice, it's the same thing. They're thinking. When you're telling, you're stopping the thinking. And they get to be robots, not hockey players. And that question of overcoaching, becoming a robot, uh, we've got to graduate to the asking portion.
Yeah. For the role of the coach, are you looking just for creating an environment, asking questions, really letting the players own the space and just kind of guiding and mentoring the players from there?
Yeah, you've expressed this really well. I think in the process, everything a coach does is you've got to transmit belief. Those 2 words, I think, are the role of a coach in any sport. The players have got to believe in themselves. You've got to believe in them. And you pick them, you chose them, you build them, and transmit belief all the time. And, this is a John Wooden line, but it really resonates with me is you never win or lose. You either win or learn. And I actually celebrate losing. And that doesn't mean I don't want to win. And I've had a lot of success with that philosophy in high school sports, male and female athletics, individual sports. And I live with it my entire life. And I know that it gets results. And I sure feel better about myself, and the players enjoy the experience.
Very well said. And I'm thinking back to my own experiences of how failure was like, how do I look at this and understand why it didn't go my way and learn from it to figure out how I could do it better next time? And there's so much value in failure. Like it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing.
Totally. And even when you think in school, failing an exam or failing a test, right away you think you're not good enough. You're not smart. And that's really inhibiting to have that kind of a mindset. And when I taught high school and I retired and I came back to the same high school often to visit with some of the staff members, and the new principal was one of the staff members, and she had put a sign up in the phys ed office. And I use this sign, talking of many coaching clinics. It's not about this how smart the child is. It's about how the child is smart. It's the same in coaching. It's not about how good the player is. It's about how they are good. Find their gift, nurture their gifts. And I think Daryl Belfry does it best. He manages to differentiate the skill levels, and he knows how to take them up the ladder. And it's up to the individual, but you can't put the binders on progress or put the brakes on their progress by pigeonholing them into being third, fourth line players at 8 years old and only getting maybe 4 shifts a game while the stars get double shifted. And that's the essence of the problem with minor sports. Shortening of the bench for an outcome versus managing the bench equally, in my mind, not just fairly, thinking that you're coaching and giving the kids an opportunity to experience success and failure in all situations. Power play, penalty kill, 5-on-5, and trust them. Show that you believe in them. They'll believe in themselves. They'll respond to the challenges, and it will surprise you in the end. And I have an interesting story related to that idea. When I took early retirement from high school, I took over the Oval female hockey program at the University of Calgary. Now, the program was started by Shannon Miller, who moved on to University of Minnesota and won a number of national championships. She had coached in Nagano. When I was coaching Team Japan, she was on the bench with Team Canada. And when she went to Minnesota, she asked me to take over the Oval program. And she had recruited some outstanding 18-year-old young players. And there were a couple of veterans that weren't going to be with the team. Jennifer Botterill, Haley Wickenheiser being two of them. They were going to be centralized while I coached this Oval team. It was really a good team. And after centralization in the Olympics, they came back. The 2 players I had came back, joined our team, and we played in the national final. And I rolled the lines. I created combinations and chemistry and good pairings. And but when you add 2 stars to the team, I just stayed with my philosophy. And when you've got 2 superstars on a team like that, it didn't even enter my mind to change my philosophy. So in the final game against the Toronto Arrows, who had 8 Olympians on it, and I had 2, we were ahead most of the game, rolling our lines. And we got into, we were ahead 2-1 with about a minute left. And a player came off, and Hayden Wickenheiser jumped on the ice out of her turn in enthusiasm because she wants to win. She's the driven player. Well, we got a too many player on the ice penalty. So they tie the game. We're going into overtime. And wow, what a depressing feeling. We were that close to winning a national championship. So I kept a positive outlook. I went in the dressing room and said, girls, what would you think before we started this if you said we're going to play the Arrows in the national final in overtime? Would you be happy? And they said, yeah, well, we are. Okay, so change the mindset. But we rolled the lines pretty same way, and they were taking it to us in our end to face off, and I just rolled the line. So I called a timeout with a line that was out there, and a little bit of a face-off play where we scrambled the puck, a D scrambled it, and we had a forward jump out, Botterill through the middle, came from the inside in the net front to pick up the puck, go down the ice on a 2-on-1 and we scored the winning goal. And I was rolling the lines. And after the game, taking pictures, I stood beside Haley and I said, you never thought we could win, did you? She said, no. I said, well, remember one thing, the best team wins. And that having lived that, gone through it, when I watch coaches coach and shorten the bench and get these people out and those people out and match lines, I'm thinking, whoa, no, they don't transmit belief. They're pigeonholing players into roles, and I think some of the best teams in the NHL are caught in that trap. They pay a lot of players money. The expectations are putting pressure on those players, and the achievement potential of the other players is lost. So balancing minutes at the NHL level is the most important thing. You've got to build a team first, and there's a lot of team building dynamics that go into that over the course of a season. So
That's quite amazing. I know more and more teams are rolling lines regardless of what they have. Chicago Steel being a great example of a team that does that at the highest level. And the teams usually do take some lumps in the beginning of the season, but exactly what you said, by the end of it, the entire team is better for it, and they become the better teams.
Yeah.
By the end of the season, are able to roll. That's quite a story there. That's awesome, and congrats on winning that. Throughout the season, I'm curious how this works. How do the older players or the players with more talent or skill or whatever you want to call it, handle rolling lines? I feel like sometimes players can be a little bit needy, saying, "Hey, I'm the best player here, and I need to play more, and it's going to give us the best chance." How do you like to handle, I guess, communication with players and giving it so it's for the best of the team, not just best for them?
Well, the problem starts when the kids begin playing hockey. In minor hockey, if the philosophy of putting out your best players all the time permeates, then you make it very difficult for those star players to adapt to a team play role later. And sometimes they move up and the same philosophy exists. And I watched one of the teams in Canada playing the Memorial Cup, Regina Pats, and they had Sam Steele on their team. Obviously, a top forward drafted by LA, I think. But he was playing 2-minute shifts. Like when you play minor hockey, those best players are out every second shift, and they stay out too long. And there's kids that don't get on the ice. And those teams don't necessarily win championships. They might win games, but those good players, great players, get more individually skill developed, but they don't learn good habits. So when you inherit players like that, and that's the conundrum that the NHL coaches and the American League coaches get coming from the junior ranks, if they all coach the same way, shortening the bench, and don't manage the bench, you've got a big job. You're a salesman. You've got to convince the group of how important the group is, and that's how you acquire the best result. So when you look at Tampa, the last 4 teams in the Stanley Cup, their ice time minutes are more balanced than any minor hockey team I've watched. And, I understand they roll the lines and they do have power play units and they do have penalty kill units. But I don't think Tampa Bay double shifted people on the PK and the power play. So when I watch an Olympic team, like our women's team play, and they double shift, they have some players play both the power play and PK. I don't care if they win. I said, you haven't built a team and they don't win. And we haven't won for the past 10 years because they've slipped away from that philosophy. And hopefully we can get back into it and compete against Americans this year in the female game. So
Talking about the female game, you've been heavily involved with that for quite some time. I know you coach with the Japanese women's Olympic team as well. I'm curious what the cultural differences are between North America and Japan, but also the differences maybe from a men's game to a women's game.
Well, a friend of mine, Tim Bothwell, played in the NHL. He's coaching Team Norway now in the Worlds, assisting another friend from Sweden his friend from Sweden is the head coach of the team. They both coached in 2006 at Torino. Tim was on the Canadian bench, and the Swedish coach beat the U.S. that year. They got the silver medal against Canada. So it's quite interesting. Tim came up with a line. He says, guys have to win to have fun. Girls have to have fun to win. That's pretty much it. They trust, the social side, the emotional intelligence side of the game coming from the women's side is extremely high, but that's the way. You want the person next to you, your teammate, to do well. Not you before them, but them with you. And that's a very important formula. They interviewed the coach of the Finnish national team last night on television. And I'm going to edit and save what he said because he was asked the same question. And his role with the team is to serve them. The coaching staff, we are your servants. That's the approach he takes. We're here for you. And that's the entire approach he takes. And he said he's become a better human being from coaching women's hockey than he was 10 years ago. So extremely good approach. They're going to play the USA in the semifinal game, I think today. But the difference is huge. The girls are easier to coach because the guys, you can tell them what to do and they'll go through the wall. They actually grow up not thinking as hockey players because they've been told what to do. And the men are just built that way and they're driven. And girls, on the other hand, want to know why. They like to understand what you're doing. They'll question you. And you have to be able to handle that. And the questioning piece is really, we're beginning to learn how to coach that way. And I maintain that there should be a female on every NHL bench with that mindset to help the coaching staff. And I believe that's one of the reasons that Daryl's brought in Haley and Wickenheiser and Danielle Goyette to work in the skills side, because he knows about the student being the teacher and being able to ask questions. And I think he's really fortunate in that organization where they understand the 21st century thinking and coaching and the new generation of players that are growing up. And I think I'm looking forward to spending some time there anyway to see what's really going on.
That's excellent. And yeah, that's such an important piece that people don't think about enough. I'm a big follower of soccer academies across the world. And I would say the top in the world is actually in America with FC Dallas. And they do a big proportion of not just allowing it to stay on the field, but also the off the field component of increasing their EQs, you say, and the ability to grow as people as well. I think that's such a critical element. I'm curious how you think we should approach the holistic development in a lot of the off ice components as much as on ice. Why is it important? How should we go about that?
Well, I don't separate off ice and on ice. Like the purpose of sport, why do you play a sport? Why do you coach a sport? And I think if every coach or administrator, manager of an association, president of an association, ask yourself this question: why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I playing a coach coordinator's role voluntarily in this association? And the same thing for a coach. Ask, why are you doing it? If you think about it, you might change the way you do things. So know your why. So the why of sport, like we're talking about something that we don't need to talk about. It's sport teaches you life lessons, and you're going to learn to win and lose. You're going to learn to listen. You're going to learn to work hard. You're going to learn to earn your roles. You're going to learn to respect teammates. And that's on and off the ice, the camaraderie that goes with it, and with winning and losing together. And it has so much potential to create change in a society if it's approached the right way. So my bigger belief is that sports done the right way can have an incredible effect on a society. You're going to build better employees, better workers, better people. It's a no-brainer. And it sort of like comes from the Father Bauer era, me playing, and we didn't have a team at the Olympics, and that's why he wanted a team at the Olympics. He saw the world and the rings of the Olympics symbolizing the unity of the world. And I grew up, just 1 year with that group of student athletes, and it had a major impact on me. And of course, I think the fact I was a first generation Canadian, my parents couldn't speak English, they were uneducated. And growing up with that mindset and coming to Canada and getting away from Stalin regime in the Soviet Union and the hardships of growing up poor and uneducated, wow, it just brings me to where I am today talking to you about what are we doing? Let's do things better. Change the way we do things at every level. But it starts with really minor hockey. That's where it starts. So the score clock can be the distractor that creates the monster that we face. And it's the reason we're having these calls is to the good of the game. You're trying to make a difference and influence people to think differently and do things differently. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. I went in a few circles there.
No, it's definitely something we all have a passion for, especially yourself. And I always say that hockey, but it's really sport in general, is the most important, unimportant thing you'll ever do. Because exactly what you talked about, it's all of these life lessons, the camaraderie, how to be a good employee. Actually, at the University of Akron, me and my mentor and head coach there, Matt Cook, we literally started a Life U program off the ice to make sure that we're teaching all of these things. Obviously, a lot of it comes through the sport itself, but there's so many elements that we want to make sure that these kids are getting, these college age kids are getting as they go through that college experience. And it's such a change as you go from people that are under their parents' umbrella to figuring it out on their own for the first time. And I feel like that's a huge change, especially today, as you see people seem to be under that family umbrella longer and longer.
Yeah, you're right. The family umbrella has changed because families have changed. The two working parents away from home and latchkey kids growing up. A lot more single parent families challenged with maintaining, making ends meet at their level, let alone paying dollars to participate in a pretty expensive sport compared to soccer. And it's difficult for them. And I think the sport can, provides a social life for them that they really enjoy. They want to see their kid. We all want to see our kids play, and we all want the same thing for them. But it's the same thing. You've got to ask, what do you want? Why are you parenting? What do you want for your kid? And when you truly think that, you want them to come out a happy, healthy person, a good person. And they never really think about that. We might think, they might think vicariously they're, living their life through the child, and they want the child to make the NHL. And yeah, there's no doubt about it. Scholarships are a distraction. And I know on the female side, they get to be a distraction because they think they got to get more ice time to get more attention, to get scouted by the college scouts to get a scholarship. And to a degree, that's true. And scouts tend to judge talent. They don't judge character. And that's what's happened. Many of the best players that are drafted are the most talented players, but they really have to learn how to become a team member to succeed. And I find in scouting for many years in the NCAA level, more so now than ever, teams shorten the bench. Canadian kids go up there. They want NCAA scholarships, so avoid the CIS, Canadian League. And they go up there and they don't get the ice time. The entitlement of the fourth year player to play the power play all the time because they've been there and double shifted. I've witnessed that. And it's some of those players are carded under 18 and under 22 national team players that aren't developing. And when they come to our camps, now at our camps, they're shortening the bench at trainout in games at camps with a red team versus a blue team. So there's no sense of development of the team, and that concerns me. So there's a lot of things that go on there, but totally, they're coaching for the life skills. When they're done playing hockey, what are they going to do? And fortunately, a student athlete's got something to fall back on. And even not a student athlete, I think of the number of players that I coach in minor hockey that are, firefighters and gone into trades and doing really well. The sport never hurt them. We've done some bad things through the way we've coached it and managed it and administrated it, but they survive in spite of us. And that's the resilience of the athlete or the student. Even in teaching, there was always the saying is they're going to learn in spite of us.
Yeah, they're going to figure out no matter what. So that's I love those stories. Those are awesome. And keeping on that element of how we can be better at coaching. I know you've been around doing coaching clinics. I believe you've written for Hockey Canada and really been a forefather of coaching education up in Canada. I'm curious how that evolution's been, how you approach that, and where you see it or where we should be pushing it to the future. Obviously, we've touched on a lot of these topics so far, but just whatever you want to touch on there, I think you've got a wealth of knowledge we should definitely tap into.
Yeah. Well, that's my major dedication for the remainder of my lifetime is the good of the game. And the wealth of experience I have, I'm attempting to share it with people that have an influence of the sports governing bodies, whether it's Hockey USA or Hockey Canada, it doesn't matter, or the Coaching Association of Canada or the USA in any sport. This has application. Our conversation has total application to their needs. And they're caught up so busy in their full-time jobs that they don't have time to truly think deeply about the things and what could be done differently. So they're caught up, and you work for a living, you get caught up in working for a living, and when things aren't going right, you need to think about new ideas. And it's sort of where Daryl Belfry comes in, the way he approaches his thinking. Boy, if he went to school to get a doctorate, he would never be the thinker that he is. He thinks differently, and what he's bringing and thinking, and his line in his book is, the student is the teacher. So the kids we coach are teaching you, keep your eyes and ears open, ask some questions, trust them, and they'll grow and believe. And that's same as at elite level, same at the NHL level, same at the university. One thing I've found at the university, I do an exercise with university coaches on perspective in coaching. And it's called a mission statement exercise. In other words, know what you're doing it for. And I asked them what they want to accomplish this season. And I talked to Danielle Goyette, who was coaching at the University of Calgary, and She had just come off her best year ever. And I thought, okay, she's going to say win a national championship. And she didn't. She said, no, we want to get 14 girls on the academic honor roll this year. We had 12 last year. And when she took that approach, student athlete first, the national championship comes as a byproduct of that, because she said the best thing she did was having her study groups. The girls arranged study groups relative to their schedules to peer teach one another. And the impact on the team has been significant. And Danielle appreciated that. It took her 8 years, she said, to learn that. And her favorite last few years before going to the Leafs now have been when she's established that perspective. So I was quite surprised. The results they got. Now she manages the bench really well. You have to earn your ice time, and you're going to sit out for the right reason, and you're going to get ice time for the right reason. And that's an art at any level. But you've got to transmit belief in the process that you're a team and doing the right things for the team.
Yeah, and through that, I'm curious of, we've talked about minor, now we've talked about college and continuing up the food chain there, per se, about how can the NHL coaching staff evolve? How can the NHL game evolve to take in some of these things? Because it's very much a results-based business, and those incentives are sometimes a little wacky.
Well, I think the teams that are succeeding, they're actually establishing living. When you watch, I watch the bench when I watch a game. I don't watch the game. I watch the coaches. And I see players looking at iPads, talking to one another. They're coaching themselves. I see coaches offering some input, but I see discussions, communication between player and coach, not yelling and telling as much. No yelling. I don't see yelling. I see coaches on the bench, and this would apply at the minor hockey level and maybe even at the college level. Coaches are playing the game in their mind. They're yelling out loud, what you got to do, what you got to do. Well, you didn't do that. You didn't do this. That's negative. It doesn't have any kind of an effect. And in the NHL now, I see coaches in much more control. And a coach has to, we say the athlete has to be in the moment. And that's the ideal performance state. It's Sports Psychology Fundamentals 101. The coach has to be in the future. Everything you say at that moment is going to affect that player moving forward. So maybe you say nothing. It's all about the right stuff, right amount, right time. Maybe you ask a question, and that takes time. So it's an art of figuring out when and where and how you're going to address something, or maybe you're not going to address it because they'll address it themselves with one another. So the art of coaching at the NHL level, this is going on with the top teams. And incidentally, Tampa Bay is an example of the top capital TEAM team. When they won the Stanley Cup, I don't know if you knew, the team gathered on the ice after for a picture. There were 100 people in the picture, close to 100. Every staff member, Barb Underhill, a speed skating coach, was there. They were at the games. They were on the ice for the team picture. And they were pretty much a roll four-line team. And they've had a lot of players that were drafted lower than many other teams, but they've managed to get the most out of everyone. And yeah, they've had to pay them more and play tricky games with balancing their budget, but they pulled it off. But I think the NHL there's a lot to learn. Like there's maybe 6 teams in the league that get this. The other teams are going to get it. Toronto's in the middle of it. That's why I'm excited about going down there. And I don't even know, like Daryl said, you're just going to hobnob. So I don't know who I'll get to talk to, if I'll get to say anything or what. But obviously, Daryl brought me in, and he didn't ask Kyle, the manager. He had Haley go and ask him because she's extremely bright and knows how to approach things, and said that it's coming in for the coaches, just to hobnob with the coaches, to think differently, look at things differently. And it dovetails with Daryl's thinking. And I think it's 21st century thinking. And he wouldn't be able to think that way if he'd stayed in school at the university. I just credit him for following his passion and doing what he's doing, because it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's amazing. And everyone they usually say it's a little lonely at the top. So getting someone to be that mentor, that friend, I think goes a long way, and make sure you've got good quality, clear thinking, because higher you go, the less people are willing to challenge you. And I love what you're talking about, servant leadership, where you're there to serve everyone else. I think that's just so powerful. Do you have an approach of how you want to go into that situation to hobnob around?
Not really. Like, I don't coach and I don't manage. I just tell real life stories from personal experience. And the people that you want to give this to, it's not easy because they're so busy, but you just put it out there. And my biggest concern, in order to make a difference, the sports governing body has the capacity to change the way they approach the coaching clinics. And they have to produce modules on the art of coaching, not the X's and O's of coaching, the emotional intelligence of coaching, the leadership of coaching, and team building. The X's and O's, like I learned, you can just pat them on the back and send them out there. You're better off doing that than trying to teach when you can't, and trying to coach and think, oh, I know who to match against who, and I know who to play with who, and I know who to double shift. No. That's why it may be more purposeful to select parent coaches who are good people that care about the kids and let them play, pat them on the back, and see where they go. Now, the hockey knowledgeable people, it's all about learning. You got to be open-minded at any age. And at my age, I'm very open-minded. And I always was a lifelong learner. But getting back to my first Bantam team and being in fourth place and frustrated, the stages of competence, and you've probably heard them before. The first one is unconscious incompetence. Like, got my first computer, I didn't know how to turn it on, let alone use it. But boy, I had young people in the offices next to me at Hockey Canada that I'd be walking over and coming back and taking my computer and coming back, and I got there. But when I reached that point of frustration coaching Bantam AA hockey, I went to the second stage. I was unconscious incompetence to consciously incompetent. What was I doing wrong? And I asked for help. If coaches don't get to that level, they're never going to get any better. Once you do, then you get to the conscious competent phase. I know what works. I know what doesn't. I know what I might change. But then the unconscious competence stage is, I call it the Scotty Pullman stage. You don't have to think about it. It's automatic. everything comes together. It's intuitive, simplified, intuitive decision making because of a wealth of experience and knowledge. But that takes years, and some people get it over time. Many of us don't. So I think it starts with education at lower levels and just realizing there are stages of learning to go through, and you can learn from one another a lot more. And the players will teach you more than you will teach them.
That's excellent. Actually, we on the Hockey IQ newsletter talked on the 4 stages there. It's amazing. I was just talking with someone the other day about this. I'm like, I probably would rather my own kid go with exactly what you talked about, a parent that knows how to coach, but maybe doesn't know hockey, and just ask good questions rather than anything else. And that's the key when I'm talking about even like drills, right? What do I need to look for? What kind of questions should I be asking? I feel like that's the most important thing. And to fall back on the thing you talked about with federations, understanding to get towards how to coach and how to teach more than anything. USA Hockey just came out with their new level 1 and 2, and they're going to do level 3 and 4 in the similar vein of exactly that: how to teach, how to coach, rather than the X's and O's, because it's for them tapping into adult learners and their past experiences, and being able to use those rather than say hockey specific experiences. And exactly what you talked about of lifelong lessons and just enjoyment of the sport and everything you get out of it through the process. So yeah, this has been awesome. I know we're approaching here on an hour, so I'll let you go whenever you need to, but I would love to just leave the floor open for you to talk about anything that you want or anything you want to touch on. I really appreciate you coming on.
No, I'm used to long podcasts and long calls. I have a group of people like myself, much younger, some the same age. I'm the oldest. That group. Now the name comes from No Dead Sharks, comes from a Woody Allen movie. His girlfriend had, in a movie, had asked him, "What do you think of our relationship?" And Woody said, "Well, it's sort of like a shark. It's not swimming, it's not moving forward, it's not breathing, it's dying." So to that, we're lifelong learners. We want to keep growing. We want to keep learning. And so that's the message: is you never know it all. In fact, you actually get dumber, realize how dumb you are as you move up the ladder and how much more there is to know. And that open-mindedness to thinking and learning is really what it's all about. And that's the roadblock to growth and improvement. So I wanted to, share that about this particular group. We had Tim Taylor on. He's a coach from Pennsylvania. He was talking about the HP, the high performance clinic that he had attended and sharing ideas, the USA Hockey one. So he spent about 20 minutes talking about that, and I edited that separately. And I was trying to say, well, what do you do there that's different than what we do here? And in the States, they're doing something different, and it's better. He went to a high performance, I call it high performance. And he explained to me the level 1, 2, 3, 4. You couldn't go to a high performance if you weren't in a level 1, 2, 3, 4. But he's coaching 12 and under hockey, level 2. So you've got the only guys that go to high performance here are NHL coaches and major junior elite coaches. And a lot of what they're doing, age appropriate art of coaching elements and X and O elements, age appropriate at a high performance thing. So they're doing a far better job at the X and O side by bringing in the minor hockey coaches, bringing in pro speakers, but the topics, they don't treat it as elite in the States. Here, they think it's elite. Elite's different. it should be different. It shouldn't. You build elite people, whether you build elite players, elite athletes, you just build elite people, good people. So that's pretty much my thoughts. If you had any other questions, I'm sure I could go many different directions, but
Yeah, we'll try to keep this a reasonable length for a car ride to and from the rink for a lot of parents and players here. So I just want to finish maybe on a quick story around Sammy Jo Small, who is the backup goaltender for three Olympic Games, an amazing book that she put together, and how important she was, even though maybe she didn't get too much playing time.
It's really interesting. My story meeting Sammy was really interesting. Before taking early retirement, I was running hockey schools, and it was like we did this for 12 years. But in the evening, we had pro skating. Like there would be a junior, AAA midget, junior A group, and then we would have a pro group skate. And all players from the Calgary area, some NHL players, American players, a lot of college players would come back. And I got a phone call from Shannon Miller saying she had a goalie that she'd like me to evaluate. And she said, she's pretty good. And I said, well, can you put her out with the top players? I says, I asked her that. She says, yes, she plays goal in the Stanford Men's University team and is one of the better goalies there. So Sammy was studying engineering. I'm not sure what type of architectural engineering there. She was there on a track and field scholarship in throwing events, a carded Olympic athlete, playing hockey, growing up as a swimmer, just an athlete. So she came out to the camp, and you might not know the names, but my other two goalies were Clint Milarchuk and Warren Skorodensky. Clint is the guy who had his neck cut in Buffalo, and Skorodensky played, I think, in Chicago. They were good. And I said, told them we're bringing out this young lady. Your ice time, they just want shots. And I gave them a heads up, and they said, no problem, Wally, bring her out. She was better than both of them in that night. She stopped pucks. I'm not a goalie scout or anything, but in fact, when I worked with the national team, I scouted goalies in a simple way. I said, you got to stop the first shot, so I'll continue to look at you. You stop the second, I'm going to look at you more closely. You stop the third, you're coming to camp. Stop the fourth, you might be making the team. And she played that way. She just battled the whole time. So she had a Hockey USA sweater on, and I didn't know her from Adam. And I phoned Shannon back. I said, Shannon, she's really good. But she's American. No, she isn't. Well, she had an American jersey on. Okay, all right. Well, you should have a look at her. So she brought her to camp. She centralized for the first 3 months of the camp, and then they let her go. And then I went to Japan to finalize to work for the women's team in Nagano. So I'm at the Olympics, and I'm standing in line at you had all kinds of venues to eat at the Olympics, and somebody taps me on the shoulder behind. It's Sammy Jo Small. They brought her in as a third goalie to the Olympics. And wow. And here she stayed in for 3 Olympics as a backup goalie. And really bright. She's on our Thursday Skype calls. And just has a unique, and all we have a number of girls on there. They bring an emotional intelligence to their thinking and just beyond expectations. But Sammy Joe playing on that national team was a glue. And she was a buck stopper. She could have played in any one of our gold medal Olympic finals, and we would have won because of her if we got outplayed. The other girls, they were technically better. They were better at practice. They looked good. They had their mechanics down. She wasn't that kind of a, she had never been goalie coached kind of thing. And everybody now is goalie coached to the point of going down too often, being predictable. So there's that unpredictability to the position of goaltending that intrigues me. And I think back to Dominic Hasek back in my era, he was the guy who stopped first, second, third, and fourth shots. He couldn't play goal today. He might not even get invited to camp. But that she was a great person. She just fit in and accepted her role. And she was disappointed. In her book, she writes about the disappointment, and she writes about what she was doing in the meantime, supporting the other players that weren't dressing for games that she was sitting with. And she went through it every cycle, every Olympics. And she had this internal, she wanted to play an Olympic final. She wanted to play a gold medal game. And she might have got one game, maybe two, lead up games, but never got to play an Olympic final. But she's brilliant, and she plays a huge role in the trying to grow the female game, particularly the pro leagues, combining the two leagues, getting them to come together so the NHL will sponsor them and make it viable and actually affordable for a woman to only play hockey. So great person. She's a person you could have on anytime. She'd love it. She'd talk about her book. She's got daughters playing hockey now. Women's hockey's becoming a big thing. But my approach to women in sports is the same as women in politics. Get them involved. They're going to bring a different element that's been lacking through all time in the way we do things. So great book, great story. And I may email you her contact information because it's a good book, but she's a real interesting person to talk to.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely be on the lookout for that.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Wally, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate the conversation. I know a lot of people are going to learn a bunch, and it's good to get all of this out there. And I'm glad that you're still involved after all these years. You could be retiring on a beach in Florida, but no, you're still involved in growing the game in a positive direction. Really appreciate everything you're doing and continue to do.
Thank you very much. Thanks for setting it up.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. So before we let you go, though, we'd like to remind you to please like our podcast, subscribe to it, give us a follow, and share this with all the hockey people in your life. We really appreciate growing this community, this podcast. Remember, we also have a newsletter, the Hockey IQ newsletter as well. Really excited to continue to grow this. So please help us grow this further by liking, subscribing, following, and sharing with everyone. So appreciate you all. Take care.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.